This video is going to focus on the economic problem. What you should all now know is what the economic problem is, and what it really is about two different things. Unlimited wants and needs, but limited resources. So when you sort of break that down, think about the first one, unlimited wants and needs. The word unlimited obviously means these things are almost infinite. Okay, so a need would be something that is essential for survival. Best examples of needs would be things like food, shelter, clothing, for example. But what we would now say in a modern civilization would expand these things. The ability to communicate with each other, so phones, for example. There are now many people that wouldn't be able to survive without broadband. We all need transport to be able to get from A to B. Wants are more sort of luxury things, they're not essential for living, but we all aspire to have as many of these different things as possible. Luxury cars, grand holidays, for example, design label clothes. Trouble is, to survive, we need to use our resources in order to produce things to meet our wants and needs. Okay, now let me bring another key word here. Economic welfare. Now, all economic welfare is basically how good is your life? How happy are you? How many of your wants and needs are met? Now, it's the job of an economist to try to raise people's economic welfare. In other words, meet as many of people's wants and needs as possible. But the big problem is we cannot meet all of people's wants and needs. Okay, now let's think about what resources actually are. Now, resources have got another name. Economists love to confuse things by giving things different names. They are our factors of production, but they can also be called inputs. Okay, now let's categorize what resources we have in an economy. We have land, we have labour, we have capital, and we have enterprise. Okay, now land resources. Think about this, you need food. Okay, well, we take lots of resources from the land in order to make you some food. So, for example, the bread I ate this morning for my breakfast had peanut butter smeared on the top of it. So peanuts are grown in the land, they're therefore a land resource. People that eat meat, burgers for example, it will require cows. They're used to produce the meat, they're a land-based resource. The fish we take out of the seas and rivers, they are a land-based resource. Water itself is a land-based resource. We make things like steel for buildings. Steel is made from natural resources from the ground. They're therefore a land-based resource. Coal, oil and gas are also land-based resources. Now, labour. These are the people available in an economy to produce what we need. Okay, so for example, I'm a teacher. Without me, you guys will struggle to meet your need for education. When you go to the doctors, okay, you will not be fixed or made better unless there's a doctor or a nurse to help you. Capital. These are basically what we call man-made aids of production. So an example of capital could be, I'm talking to you right now through headphones. These headphones have got a recording function. They help me produce things. Farmers use tractors. Factories use machines to produce things that we buy. Trainers, for example. The clothes I'm wearing now will have used some labour, but they will have also used some capital. Sewing machine, for example. Enterprise, this is basically the people that take the risks. These are the people that create businesses. So a simple example could be, think about a power station. A business might decide they're going to build a new power station in the country. Well, the enterprise is the person that puts the money in to build that power station. To make the power station successful, they will need land. Okay, so for example, the power station's got to be sat somewhere. but it will require land resources to make the power station. So the materials used to make the actual chimneys, for example, the buildings, but also once it's up and running, it will need coal, oil, depending on what the power station is, to produce electricity. It will need people to work there. That is the labour. Capital. It will have machines in order to generate the electricity. So what an entrepreneur will do, or what the enterprise will do, it will use these 4 different factors of production. What they will do, they use the resources to produce goods and services. Okay, so simple example, think about a good first of all. A good is something which is tangible. It's something that you can hold in your hand. It's something that you buy. Okay, so for example, when you go shopping, you buy clothes, you buy food. They are goods. Services are invisible, they're intangible, you can't touch them. So education is a service. I recently changed my mortgage. I got advice from some friends and colleagues. That's a service they provided for me. Healthcare provides services, advice, expertise on what you could do better. Okay, so what we do in an economy, we use these resources which are scarce, the land, labour, capital and enterprise, to produce goods and services. And ultimately it's these goods and services which will satisfy your wants and needs. Okay, so think about the process. You need food. A businessman will have bought some land, labour, capital and enterprise to produce a good which you can buy to meet your need for food. And with any other economy, any economy across the world, the more we produce, the higher the economic welfare should be. So what economies are really, really concerned about doing over time to make sure they can produce as many goods and services as possible is to make sure they are efficient. Okay, the last thing we want to be doing is to be wasting our resources. The more we waste, the less we produce. The less we produce, the less wants and needs we can meet, which means your economic welfare would be lower. Okay, so really good example. Many would argue that if there are people unemployed, that's labour going to waste. They're producing less. At college, if we have a classroom which is empty, that's less use of capital. That means we're producing less education than what we could do, which means people might not be able to get their education they need. Now, one great way of making people more efficient is to boost productivity, make people more productive. In other words, make people better skilled, better qualified, give them better machines to work with so they can produce more from their labour. Again, the more productive people are, the more they can produce, which means ultimately you guys have better economic welfare. Now, what we can also do is look to increase our factor endowment. And all factor endowment is, it's looking at how many resources are available to the economy to produce. So, simple example, if you have more labour or more capital, you can produce more. The more you can produce, ultimately the more wants and needs you can meet, and the higher the economic welfare will be in your country. So overall, just to wrap this video up, let's think about what we've done. We've looked at the economic problem, unlimited wants and needs, but limited resources. So we have what we call in economics a scarcity problem. So what we have to do to solve our economic problem, is to meet as many wants and needs as possible, to give people a good level of economic welfare. What we have to do, we have to use our resources, our factors of production, which are land, labour, capital and enterprise, to produce goods and services. And the more efficient we are, the more resources that we have, ultimately, it should make our economic problem less of a problem, which means we can meet more of people's wants and needs.